All right, so get this. Today we're diving into something that sounds like it's straight out of the onion, but it's actually real. We're talking about renaming the Gulf of Mexico
Yeah.
to the Gulf of America.
Yeah, I saw that. Pretty wild,
It's
right?
just like, seriously, is this a joke?
Well, apparently not.
Okay, so our source material is this Newsweek article from
Mm.
just today, February 11th, 2025, and it's all about the reactions to this whole name change thing. But
Yeah.
before we get into all that, can you set the stage for us? What exactly happened?
So, President Trump issued an executive order officially renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Okay.
And what's kind of crazy is this isn't just some symbolic thing, you know? We're already seeing it reflected on digital maps like in the US. Even the FAA is updating their charts to show the new name.
So it's like it's really happening out there in the digital world, at least. I mean,
Mhm.
can you imagine opening up Google Maps and seeing Gulf of America just plastered there?
Right? It's jarring.
Total mind bend. So
Mm.
what's the official reason for this? What does the executive order actually say?
So the order itself cites the need to honor American greatness and the contributions of the U.S. to the region.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. What do you think is the political strategy behind this move?
Well, if we look at it in the context of President Trump's overall messaging, it kind of fits with his emphasis on nationalism, right?
Yeah.
This renaming could be seen as like asserting American influence, dominance in the region. And that's a message that probably resonates with his base.
It's interesting, too, because this is happening at the same time as that push to revert Denali back to Mount McKinley, another renaming that reverses a previous decision.
Right, and when you see those two actions together, it makes you wonder about a broader agenda at play, like a deliberate effort to reclaim or reassert what some might consider traditional American values
No,
and
they're
symbols.
going back to a certain vision of America. Okay, so we've got the what and the why. Now let's get into the how, as in how are people reacting to this whole thing? The Newsweek article really captures the online response, and it's just
Great. Yeah, it's all over the place. You've got supporters who are praising the move as, a bold statement of American pride. And then you have detractors who see it as like this nationalistic power play with potentially negative consequences.
yeah, and the social media reactions are a whole other level, right?
Mhm.
Like Trump himself posted Gulf of America
Yeah.
in all caps on Truth Social. So he's clearly pretty stoked about it.
Oh, yeah. And then you've got Transportation Secretary Duffy framing it on X, formerly Twitter, as taking back our language, history, and country,
Wow.
which taps into a very specific kind of rhetoric around national identity and reclaiming what's perceived as lost.
Yeah, for sure. Then there's the Redditors, of course, doing what they do best, offering a mix of sarcasm, insightful commentary, and of course memes. One user suggested everyone go leave Google Maps reviews for the new Gulf, which, I mean, is actually pretty clever when you think about it.
Right.
And then another Redditor sarcastically applauded the administration for finally tackling the real issues.
Uh-huh. Yeah, emphasizing that this might be a distraction from more pressing matters.
Totally.
Yeah.
But it's not all jokes, though.
Yeah.
There are also people arguing that this move plays right into President Trump's hands by fueling division and distracting from real problems.
Absolutely. It's a classic example of how even something seemingly symbolic, like a name change, can become so polarizing and tap into these deeper societal anxieties.
It's crazy. I saw one ex-user comment that just said, "We truly live in the dumbest simulation ever." And honestly, I kind of feel that way sometimes.
I get it. It does feel like we're living in a time where the line between reality and satire is getting blurrier and blurrier.
Right. It's like, what even is real anymore? And even the TikTok influencers are getting in on this. One of them suggested renaming New Mexico instead,
Uh-huh.
which honestly makes you wonder about the logic behind this particular name change. Why the Gulf of Mexico specifically? Why not go all in on the America theme and just rename everything?
That's a good question. It really makes you think about what the true motivations might be.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move beyond just the online chatter for a second and talk about the potential real-world consequences. What could this mean for relations with Mexico and other countries that border the Gulf?
Yeah, that's where things get a bit more serious. This unilateral renaming of a shared geographical feature, it's bound to cause some diplomatic tension.
It's like a sign of disrespect almost, like minimizing the claims of other countries to the Gulf.
Right, and it's crucial to remember that even symbolic acts can have real-world consequences. We've seen how quickly this name change has spread in the digital sphere, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out on the international stage.
Yeah, this could have some serious ripple effects. Could this even spark a trend of nationalistic renaming efforts around the world?
Yeah.
And what kind of message does that send to the international community?
Those are big questions, and it's
Yeah,
something we need to pay close attention to. It'll be fascinating to see how this all unfolds.
definitely.
On that note, I think it's time to take a closer look at the potential long-term impact of this name change, both domestically and internationally.
Yeah, let's dig into that.
So will this just be like a digital thing, or will it like actually start showing up, in official documents, textbooks, even like everyday language?
Yeah, it makes you think about how maps and names, they have this power to shape how we see the world. Even if geographically nothing changes, could calling it the Gulf of America actually change how people think about the region?
It's definitely possible language has this huge influence on how we understand the world around us.
Yeah.
By renaming it, it's like they're trying to frame the narrative, to assert ownership, even if they don't say it directly.
Which, let's be real, wouldn't be surprising coming from President Trump. He's all about projecting strength and, American exceptionalism.
Exactly. And for his supporters, this move probably reinforces their worldview. It's like a symbolic victory for them, taking back what they believe is rightfully American.
Right, but what about the potential fallout? We talked about Mexico's reaction earlier, but I'd love to hear more about the diplomatic implications of all this.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine this going over well with Mexico or other countries that border the Gulf. It could be seen as just totally disregarding their history, their culture, and their own claims to the region.
It's almost like symbolically erasing them, diminishing their presence there.
Yeah, that's a valid point, and it raises concerns about the precedent this sets. Like, if this kind of unilateral renaming becomes more common, it could lead to more tension, even conflict over shared geographical features.
It's like we're going backwards to a more isolationist, America first kind of approach to international relations.
It's a worrying thought, and it shows how important it is to think critically and be engaged in these conversations. We can't just accept these changes without questioning them. We need to ask why they're doing this and think about the consequences, both the intended ones and the unintended ones.
So what can people actually do about it? Besides, venting on social media or sharing memes, are there concrete things people can do to make their voices heard?
There are always ways to be civically engaged, like contacting your elected officials, joining advocacy groups that share your views, participating in peaceful protests. These are all ways to express your concerns and advocate for change.
And even just having these conversations like we are right now, that can help raise awareness and encourage people to think more deeply about these actions.
Definitely, sometimes the most powerful form of resistance is simply refusing to accept things at face value. It's about asking questions, challenging assumptions, and having thoughtful discussions with others.
Okay, I want to switch gears a bit and talk about the Streisand effect. For those who might not know, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so the Streisand effect is this phenomenon where trying to suppress information actually makes it spread more widely. It's like
Mm.
trying to hide something only makes it more visible.
So in this case, is it possible that all the controversy around the Gulf of America is
Yeah.
actually giving it more attention and legitimacy than it would have gotten otherwise?
It's definitely possible the more we talk about it, debate it, even make fun of it, the more it becomes part of the public consciousness. And in a way that makes it more real, regardless of whether we agree with it or not.
It's like this weird paradox where even those who oppose the name change are accidentally helping it spread just by talking about it.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even our attempts to resist something can sometimes have unintended consequences.
Okay, so back to the initial shock a lot of people felt when they saw Gulf of America on their maps. What does that reaction tell us about how we perceive the world and how easily those perceptions can be messed with?
I think it shows the power of the familiar. We're so used to seeing the world in a certain way with certain names and labels that even a small change can feel really jarring. It makes us realize that our understanding of the world is constantly being shaped by external forces.
It's like a glitch in the matrix, a moment where you question everything you thought you knew. And sometimes those glitches are actually valuable because they make us wake up and re-examine our assumptions.
Exactly. They can spark curiosity, critical thinking, and a deeper engagement with the world around us. And that's what we're trying to do here on The Deep Dive.
We're not just presenting information. We're encouraging you, the listener, to dig deeper, ask questions,
Yeah.
and come to your own conclusions. So as we wrap up this exploration of the Gulf of America, what are some key takeaways we want listeners to consider?
I think the most important thing is to recognize that even actions that seem symbolic can have real-world effects. We need to be aware of the power of language maps and names, and how they can shape our perceptions and influence how we interact with the world.
And we need to be willing to have thoughtful discussions. even when it's about something that might seem absurd or unimportant at first.
Exactly, because sometimes the most important conversations are the ones that make us uncomfortable, the ones that challenge our assumptions and make us think differently.
I feel like we just scratched the surface of this Gulf of America thing.
Yeah, there's definitely more to unpack here. And it's important to remember that this isn't like a standalone thing. It's part of a bigger trend of using language and symbols to assert power and control the narrative.
You're right, we've seen similar tactics throughout history, like renaming cities and landmarks to controlling the language used in official documents and media.
It's a reminder that the battle for hearts and minds is often fought on this symbolic level. And in the digital age where information spreads so quickly, these symbolic battles can have a massive impact on public opinion and even global politics.
It's almost like we're living in a world of hyperreality, where the lines between what's real and what's simulated are constantly blurring. And in that world, the ability to control the narrative, to define how things are talked about, becomes even more important.
That's a really good point, and it highlights the importance of media literacy and critical thinking. We need to be able to deconstruct these narratives, to see through the spin and propaganda, to understand the power dynamics at play.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can we give them to navigate this complex and often confusing world?
I think the most important thing is to encourage a healthy dose of skepticism. Don't just accept everything you see here or read at face value. Question everything, dig deeper, and try to find different perspectives.
And don't be afraid to challenge the dominant narrative even if it feels uncomfortable or unpopular.
Exactly. The world needs more critical thinkers, people who are willing to ask tough questions and challenge those in power.
And maybe, just maybe, by having these conversations, by engaging in thoughtful dialogue and encouraging critical thinking, we can start to change the narrative for the better.
It's a worthwhile goal, and I believe that through education awareness and a commitment to truth and justice, we can create a world where language and symbols are used to bring people together rather than divide them.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the Gulf of America. We hope this conversation has sparked your curiosity and encouraged you to think critically about the world around you. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep diving deep.